today happened to be actually marked over here on the Haimi website on the 17th of Tevet, the Hilula of Rabbi Yitzhak Belmonte. He passed away in the year 1774. We're talking about 250 plus years ago. I do see from the source that it could have been he passed away in Yud Chet Nisan, according to Wikipedia, but at his May, we are going to speak about him because he was a famous rabbi in his time. He actually came from the great rabbinic auspices. His father's name was Rabbi Moshe Bילמונטי, another rabbi we spoke about before on various occasions before. Now, it's predicted he was born around the year 1710. So that would have meant, if he would have passed away, he would have been about 64 years of age. So very interesting. We'll go out and learn Torah among the great rabbis of Turkey. Remember, Turkey in the 1700s was probably one of the leading places across the world when it came to Torah study and yeshivot and so on and so forth. It's actually interesting. He would actually learn in the famous yeshiva under auspices of Rishon LeZion, who would come to Rishon LeZion, of Israel, Eretz Israel, of Jerusalem. Rabbi Yitzhak, one of the students over there was a famous rabbi, I think from the Abu Lafia family, Rabbi Abu Lafia, who remember we spoke about Abu Lafia, rabbinic dynasty. Many of them will go on to become great rabbis, especially in Tiberias and Tiberias. It's also, he learned Torah, not under great wealth in himself. למד תורה בעוני. חלה בכל זאת התלמיד להעמיד את תלמידים ולהרביץ תורה ברבים. It seemed like he was a very, very great outreach rabbi, also doing grandiose curative work, inspiring the throngs of the public when it came to Torah. You have to point about him. I think come what year 1771, I think in Thessaloniki, his book called the Sha'ar HaMelech was printed. Remember, Thessaloniki at that point in time in Greece had a very strong publishing house. Now, what was this book? It was a Perush on the Rambam, I think, which was divided into two different chalakim, two different parts. It would actually be published in various different countries, and I think it was a Torah authorship work on the Sechet Beitzah, or the tractate of Beitzah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe part of it was lost, or it was at one stage in time, some of the manuscript form himself, but it was a famous book, be it at this May. Now, come on, a year later, in 1772, there was a really big fire that actually took place in Izmir, which we've spoken about on many occasions before, and this would destroy, not just cause huge damage to people's lives, people died also, but many Torah books and Torah manuscripts got destroyed in the fire. Remember, they didn't have internet like nowadays, or computer where people can access files nowadays. So it really destroyed a lot of the great Torah work from the Chachmei, from the great rabbis of Turkey. And I think I think many of the synagogues got ruined over there. And I think he would actually go on to move to Italy at that point in time. Remember, Italy was, let's say, a place that many of the people could go to from Turkey at that stage in time. Less of Kesed, Lishukim, but taking this at Bizmi. I think he'd go out to Turkey, to Italy, in order to raise funds to re-establish the synagogues and various different synagogues, Beit Midrashes, yeshivot in Turkey, to put them back in standing at that point in time, as it was a dire situation, I believe. Now, I believe he passed away in 1774. Now, it's interesting. The Hayomi website here is going to commemorate his Hilula to be the 17th of Tevet, but seemingly I think it was the 18th of Nisan, according to Wikipedia. So that's today. But why are they commemorating it on Yud Zayin Tevet, the 17th of Tevet? Because I think, as it says over here, Yom Chatam et Sifro Sha'ar HaMelech, they'd actually get Haskamana from many of the rabbis on that specific date. It was on the 17th of Tevet, from the great rabbis of Izmir, of Turkey, at that point in time. So the Haimi website will actually commemorate that, because obviously it was a powerful day on his personal calendar with regards to Torahship. Now, I think come with the year 1813, this would be about 30 years approximately after he passed away. His Talmidim, including Rabbi Yitzhak Mayo, will bring about his sefer called the Darchei Hayam, which is a great book in itself, and which bring about various different of his drashot, his sermons, also of Rabbi Yitzhak Nonish Belmonte. I think that actually from Izmir. I think, if I'm not mistaken, many of the sermons was collected together maybe in the year 1751, or maybe many of them were actually written in that specific year in of itself. We can add more information about him, as we said before. We're going to explore through the highlights of his book in the coming minutes. But yes, so seemingly, I think there's different ways of pronouncing his name. Another way, Bילמונטי or Belmonte, also that could be. He was born in Izmir, and he actually died in Livorno in Italy at that point in time. It was part of the Ottoman Empire, and his rabbi was Rabbi Yitzhak Belmonte. His star student was Rabbi Yitzhak Belmonte, rabbi we've spoken about on various occasions before. Yeah, I think also he would learn under the auspices of Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia at one point in time. It says, he would actually bring about the books. He would also, as we said before, he learned under auspices of these two great rabbis, Rab Bod and Rab Rizili. And yeah, I think he did suffer from some health problems when he was young. It says, Baruch Gagin. Remember the famous Gagin family, was also spoken about on various occasions before. So that's very, very interesting. I think he'd also write various books on various different tractates inside the Talmud, especially on Masechet Baba Batra. Remember, we've spoken about the three Babas before, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra, and Baba Kama also. So he would actually write there. And it says here, I think it was on 18th of Nisan. So seemingly he passed away on the 18th of Nisan, on the third day of Passover over here, which maybe we did record a video about him. I think on previous occasions, could be we did, but we get the honor and the schut this morning on a journey going to the holy city, the capital of Israel, to speak about it over here. Now, it's actually interesting just to talk a few words in regards to this book, the colossal work of the Sha'ar HaMelech. I think Chubar al-Seder Rambam, interesting enough, it was on the order of the Rambam. Deal really with various different parts and topics within regards to Talmud. Harishonim b'sha'ar mafreshei Talmud, hu bolet hen be'inav be'sagnon chachmei Turkey. So really many of the great rabbis of Turkey will actually really hold this book to the highest thing. V'hen b'bikiyot hani chevet ab b'sifrei ha'achronim. He was an expert with regards to the different perushim or the famous achronim. B'karo eino sefer halacha, ach li'itim hu osek halachot. Sifro zacha letohoda rabba, v'rabbim g'dei doro shavchu et sifro. Many of the great rabbis all across the world will really give a great appraisal of this book, especially also Rabbi Akiva Eger, interesting enough, who was a famous rabbi from the Ashkenazi community countries. Also the famous Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay, who was one of the famous Moroccan and Israeli rabbis of his time. Also Harav Yaakov Shor, another great rabbi. Hanacha et Harav Tzvi Yecheskel Michlason, also. ולא יבוש מקריך ספר שער המלך על הרמב"ם, אשר על ידו תתחנך לבקיאות הרוצה מועילה. So really gets great lavish prosal over there with regards to בסרו מזכירים מספר ספרים אשר אינם קיימים כיום כמו שיטה מקובצת על מסכת קידושין ועל מסכת יבמות. ספר לקדמון וראשונים בזמן הרשב"א ושיטות וחידושים לרבי Aaron LaPapa. Now, Rabbi Aaron LaPapa should not be any stranger to us. We've spoken about him on various occasions before. He, in the series, was one of the great rabbis of his time. Anyone tuning in live at the moment, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 9,000 subscribers. There's Siloniki, I think especially Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia and Rabbi Chaim al-Ba'ali, great rabbis of the time. I think Brona in Tafkuf Samach Aleph. Im ha'arot v'chidushim b'shem ta'am ha'melech v'Rab Baruch ben Yonah Yitlas, if I'm not mistaken. Baskamot Rabbi Mordechai Bennett, also Rabbi Elazar Felixos v'Rab Elazar Kaleh, if I'm not mistaken, who was the head of Jewish court in Rechnitz, if I'm not mistaken, the author of the Or Chadash. I think in Levov also he would get an appraisal, if I'm not mistaken, especially from Rabbi Yosef Shaul Nitnas, another great rabbi. I think also in Levov, in Tafresh Nun Vav, you'll get a haskama from Rabbi Yitzhak Shemelakish and Rabbi Aryeh Leib Horovitz. I think he was Beno Shel Harav Yisrael Misalant, another great rabbi of his time. Also in Levov, you'll get Tafresh Ein Aleph Mchudushei Efron Shlomo מאת הרב שלמה קלוגה, וחידושי מעשה חשוב, מהרב חיים שמואל ברנובים. Also, I think it was Chatan, if I'm not mistaken, the son-in-law of the famous Rabbi Akiva Eger, also in Yerushalayim, in Tafshin Nun Daled, but Seta. I think the book called Ora Mizrach, which came from Machon Yerushalayim, will actually, I think, very much publicize and celebrate his books also, which we have to point out over there. Hakahot Rav Shlomo Landau, beno shel Rav Yechezkel Landau, Ba'al HaNoda B'Yehuda, so have correspondence and approval over there. Bakot Rav Betzalel Ronshborg also. כמוכן נוסף לספר גדול, ובו רשימות הערות על סדרי סימני הספר בגדולי כותרות של הרב, בעריכת הרבנים אליהו שלמה רענן וברוך כהנא. Very interesting. Let's explore a bit about who was his Talmidim. We spoke about that a little bit before. Included among them was Rabbi Yehuda Eliezer, Rabbi Chaim Yehuda Eliezer, who was author of the Simcha Yoada, very great Torah. Also Rabbi Chaim Abraham Bar Yitzhak Ardit, who was a Ba'ana Chidushim, which was, I think, printed in the Matzah Ephraim. Also Rabbi Raphael Yosef Chazan was the author of the Chakrei Lev. And Rabbi Raphael Yitzchak Meir was the author of the Sharashei Hayam. Now the great rabbi we have to point out over here today. Now let's explore a few of the highlights of his Torah works. You know, there's so many great Kiddushim and writings he put down. It's hard to justify it in a space of a few minutes. But I think he'd actually teach in one of his books, if I'm not mistaken. He would teach Melamed, Shnoten Belev Tov, Noten Koach La'oni, L'chayot Oto, the importance of doing chesed and charity work over here. This was one of his teachings, which I think he actually brings down in the Darkei Hayam. I think in page 177, if I'm not mistaken, Amud Aleph. Remember this book, the Darkei Hayam, was printed in Saloniki, I think in the year 1813. This would have been about 29 years after he passed away. Another teaching, Melamed, Shemetoch, Sheba'u Alav, Alidei Yisurim, Yet Zahid B'Shmiratan. You know, talking about Yisurim, suffering over here. Once again, this comes from Darkei Hayam. I think this actually is featured very much in page 188. Naturally, we call that Kuf Pei Chet. Once again, it was printed in Saloniki, this Torah class work. Melamed, Shelo Avda Tikva, Shemishu Ben, Lo Yitzio, Shelo Yeben. It's another teaching he gives over here. This comes once again from Darkei Hayam. I think this actually comes from page 197. Kuf Tzedek Zayin, respectively, on Amud Bet, if I'm not mistaken. I think this would span another page, these teachings, onto Amud Aleph Kuf Tzedek Chet, once again printed in Saloniki. Another teaching of his that comes from the book. Melamed, Yiten Shana B'Shana, Manat Korala, La'asi Yetumim, Ubanot Tzumim, talking about the importance with regards to taking care of Yetumim. If there is an importance of tzniut, modesty also. This also once again comes from Darkei Hayam, I think from page 199 Amud Bet. If I'm not mistaken, once again going through the theme of Chesed. Another teachings of his actually comes this time from Darkei Hayam in page 180 Amud Bet. He would teach about Melamed Shra'a Moshe Yitro Shmagia Na'a Lenoten Hamatzana. This teaching he gives over here. It's talking about basically over here Kasher Chachamim Hagidu B'malat HaDayan הדן דין אמת לאמיתו, זאת מצוא ביתרו, שהגיע משה לכנוסו לארץ, להיות דיין עליהם כמבואר, וכתב בספר מאירת עיניים, לגבי חצה שאין בו דין חלוקו, שדת חכמים היא שכל אחד שמגיע לו הנאה לנותן, אין דת המתנה משום שונא מתנות. כי הנה משה רבנו, עליו השלום, רצה לזוכות ביתרו. He's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu here, Moses, with this teaching. ולתן לו מתנה בארץ ישראל, אבל גם שמן הדין אין לו חלק בארץ, שגם אין לו חלק בארץ, ומשום כך בא יתרו ואמר, לא אלך כי אם אל הארצי אלך, על דרך שמרו, ונורותיה אורחות על יד היאור, אין הליכה אלא לשון מיתה, הנה הוא הולך למות. וזה רמז יתרו באמרו, לא קצתי בחיי, לא אלך למות, משום שכתוב, ושונא מתנות נחיה. Just giving a teaching, basically, with regards to this famous phrase of, someone that hates presents will live. A famous phrase. אכן משה רבנו עליו השלום השיבו, אל נא תעזוב אותנו, כי על כן ידעת חנותו במדבר, להיות לנו לעניים, שתהיה מעינה בתורה, וכיוון שמגיע לו הנאה, ונותן המתנה, אין בו משום שונא מתנות שלך כחמים. So, very, very interesting. He was author of the Sha'ar HaMelech. This is the Gates of Kingship book over here. He was born in Turkey, and passed away in Italy, like many of the famous rabbis of that point in time, which we've spoken about on various occasions before. And I'd very much recommend everyone to learn about his teachings and his books. He gave over grandiose Torah works over here, which is very, very interesting. And I do think we did speak about him possibly last year. This week marks the Kilul of many, many famous Rabbanim we have to speak about over here. And it's actually going to be on the same date, I think, commemorated on the Haimi website, the Kilul of Rav Salmon Mutzafi. Let's just speak about him for a minute because it happens to be his Hilula. Remember, we said Rabbi Belmonte, I think his Hilula was it's actually on the 18th of Nisan, but it's marked because that's the date of the Haskama. What's interesting, Rav Salmon Mutzafi, Yud in Tibet, marks his passing. I think he was born in the year 1900 in Baghdad, and he passed away in 1975, if I'm not mistaken. He came from great auspices himself. Rabbi Tzion Meir Mutzafi was his father in 1900, and he learned under great rabbis, especially inside the synagogue in Baghdad. And I think he would learn in the Midrash Talmud Torah when he was 5 years of age. And I think in 1909, I think at the time period when famous Ben Shchai passed away, Rabbi Yosef Chaim, באותו היום קיבל על עצמו לקום בחצות הלילה ללמוד תורה עד עלות השחר. He would take on himself to learn Torah till עלות השחר every day, and he would do this. And he would learn in the famous Midrash Bet Zilka. Rabbi Mutzafi, we're just speaking about him for a minute because it marks his Hilula here on the 17th of Tebet. So just to say a few words just about him also. Kavar b'gil 17, I think when he was 17, לאחר שהשלים את לימוד הש"ס בארבעה תורים, he would actually finish it. החל ללמוד עם רבו, וכל יום בנקלע בסודות התורה. Actually go on to learn highest depths of Torah. חלק מימיו היה לומד בחברותה עם חכם ניסים כדורי, learn with Rabbi ניסים כדורי, ובסיום יום לימודו היה הולך לשמש את חכם יעקב חיים, who actually the son of Ben Ish Chai, he was very close to, until יום הפטירתו בשנת 1921. He passed away in 1921, I believe. I think in 1918 he was became a mohel and a shochet. Rabbi Mutzafi did. He was only about 18 years of age at the time. And 1920 he was appointed to the rabbinate, if I'm not mistaken. And I think sadly, his father was suffered from health problems. Chacham Tzion Meir Mutzafi, he also once again put himself all the yoke of parnas on the family. He would actually raise some money over there, and he would work. I think Baskei Hakvim Menachem Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, Chaver Haformanot Rashi Hakila Yudit. And then Chacham Solomon Mutzafi would learn in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. He would also learn English and also French, and I think also Cheshbonot, number. שיהיה למנהל עסקיו הפלומניים של מנחם דניאל. He will get a prominent role under Rabbi Menachem Daniel, and then I think he would be really working part of his day just concentrating on learning, especially the Midrash Bet Zilka, and would really, I think, help with regards to the Avrechim, with regards to learning itself. I think he would get married to Murat Tova, if I'm thinking Rabbanit Tova, and they would have daughters and sons, if I'm not mistaken, including among them the famous Rabbi Ben Tzion Mutzafi, one of the famous rabbis now, who's Rosh Yeshiva B'nai Tzion, very great rabbi, and Rosh Yeshiva of Minchat Yehuda. And I think his Chatan happens to be Rabbi David Batsri, who was a Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat HaShalom, and a great rabbi of his time, we have to point out. So it happens to be his Hilula here. Chacham Solomon Mutzafi היה משתוקק לעלות לארץ ישראל, וביקר בה 5 פעמים. לרוב היה יוצא בראש חודש ניסן כדי לעשות את הפסח בארץ ישראל. He would make a special effort to be in the Passover festival in the land of Israel. It's very interesting enough. ונשאר בה כל ימי ספירות העומר עד חג השבועות. 1905 he would actually make Rabbi Yehuda Fatah, if I'm not mistaken, and which was really, really absolutely crazy, incredible. But when some Rebbe, we spoke to Rabbi Yehuda Fataya on various occasions here on this series, and he would live in the Beit Yisrael neighborhood in Jerusalem, and he would move to the Geula neighborhood afterwards. והקדיש כל עצותיו לימוד התורה. And I think in 1937 השלים את לימוד את סידור כוונת הרש"ש, חכם שלום מזרחי שרבי, ומעל החל לימוד בספר זה שינה אורחות חייו. היה באמת בהנאה העולם הזה, ועד שנתו האחרונה לא פסק ולהוסיף חידושים והקלות בצידוק כוונת הרשע שלו. Very much involved with this really important siddur over here. I think in 1942 we set up the yeshiva B'nai Tzion al yidei Keber Rachel Imenu. Very interesting. 1948 he would actually move to yeshiva, to the Beit Knesset of Tvik, if I'm not mistaken, in the Makor Baruch neighborhood in Jerusalem, and would actually work in the Beit Knesset called the Ohel Rachel, if I'm not mistaken. And בשנת 1954 איבד את הכרתו בשל בעיות בתפקיד כליותו. למחרת כשחולתו שבא עליו סיפר כי נשמתו יצא. אך בית דין של מעלה קיבל ערכה להמשך חייו, ובכל שעה הוא מוכן להתייצב לפני בית דין של מעלה. And I think he passed away on the 17th of Tevet, if I'm not mistaken, in 1975, and was buried in Haram Menachot, Rav Salman Mutaf he was. And he wrote great Torah books, including the Siftei Tzadikim, which would come out in 1981 after he passed away, the Orach Tzadikim, which was printed in 1992 after he passed away, and a book in 2017 about Elef Lecha Shlomo, which came out that year, 8 years ago. And he was a great rabbi of his time, passed away around 1975. Marks his Hilula also today. Here happens to be on the 17th of Tevet, passed away in 1975. But anyway, we're speaking primarily today about Rabbi Belmonte, we have to point out, was a great rabbi of his time. And Rabbi Belmonte passed away nearly over 250 years ago in the year 1774. He was born in 1710. One of the great rabbis of Turkey and Italy at this time. Now friends, everyone, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here and get over 9,000 subscribers, which is absolutely phenomenal. Just on a journey here to Jerusalem from the city of Beit Shemesh. I've already recorded, friends, 1,400 rabbis. Information about 1,400 rabbis here on this series. Go on to Stories of Tzaddikim and you'll be able to watch over them. Now friends, if any of you descend from any of the great rabbis we have this week to speak about, please send me a message. I'd love to hear more information on them also. I'm wishing you all a Shavuot Brach. We're going into the book of Shemot this week, Sefer Shemot, and the Parshat Shemot naturally. So wish you all an inspiration week. Take care and be well, everyone. Take care and Shavuot.